Although I can't prove what I saw those nights was real, this story shaped who I am today, and the eagerness to share this story has sunk as deep as a National Geographic treasure hunt ship in the ocean. And seeing all of you share your stories of disdain makes me feel almost normal for experiencing that fateful night. It was my 10th birthday. I had only a few friends at the time, and to this day I can't believe anyone showed up with the theme being Big 10. There were 4 of us, those being me, Alex, Sarah, and Tom. Somehow we had all convinced the oblivious adults to allow us to explore the small patch of trees barely able to be called forest, but still big enough to get lost in. We walked out the door, leaving the terrible inflated green balloons and the sideway hung tapestry behind. We waved goodbye and headed out beyond the house. "What if we see a serial killer?" Sarah called out to the rest of us boys who were so far ahead of her we could barely hear. "Oh, don't worry, dear princess, your chivalry knight will defend you," Tommy called back, making fake stab motions, pretending to fight back monsters or whatever creatures were filling his young mind. "Tommy, you couldn't even fight off Daryl at school a week ago." Me and Alex laughed as we stopped for the rest to catch up. "Hey," Tommy said sheepishly as his arms fell back in place. "He's like 7 feet tall." "Well, I still thought it was brave," Sarah said with a smile as she patted his shoulder, just reaching his place in the field. "Come on, guys," I dragged out as I started walking slowly into the tree line so the rest could catch up. "They're gonna expect us back soon. I want to see something cool." Little did my 10-year-old mind know that I was gonna see something cool at a price. The woods, even though patchy, were still clogged with trees. Although some stories say that the sounds of the forest fill your ears the moment you step in, I can only remember now that it was eerily quiet that day. We were too busy being kids to feel the dense silence in the air. "Hey, stop that!" I swatted at Tommy as he slid behind me, pretending as if he wasn't just pulling at my shoulder-length hair for the past 5 minutes. "I'm bored," Alex said sluggishly behind us. "Well, is the party behind us really any better?" I asked. "No," he said quietly, his shoulders slouching a bit. "Exactly." I noticed the 2 boys drift off the path as Tommy spotted a squirrel, and the adventure began for him and Alex. I was left alone with Sarah. I didn't know her that well. She was Alex's cousin, and we had only spoken a few times during school. "So," she said, taking a few steps to my side, "you get anything cool for your birthday?" I was too busy looking at her very long auburn hair to hear her question as I hit her with a small, "Your presents," she chuckled, placing her hands behind her back. "Oh, yeah, real cool stuff." I tried remembering for a moment, but suddenly found myself an amnesia patient in the doctor's office. Her tone seemed to die down as she just began to follow me to a small log we both sat on. I kicked at the dirt a little and she joined me. It was a nice moment in my mind, as I can remember it. My last normal moment. "Mike!" The loud scream ripping through the forest. My name. I looked quickly at the direction it came from and back to Sarah, her face white, a look of terror that still rings clear in my head. I could imagine my face looked just as bad. As I quickly got up from the log, dirt sprang in front of me. I started running in the direction it came from. I knew it was Alex, and I knew he was in trouble. I lost sight of Sarah and everything became a blur. I got lightheaded and then another scream. This wasn't Alex, and I was lost. "Alex!" I screamed through the blank green all around me. "Tommy!" The forest became a nightmare. I started moving in all different directions. After a while, the dark started peering over the trees, the stars becoming eyes staring at me. After about 10 minutes of darkness, I gave up. I sat myself on the dirt. I wanted to cry. How could I have been so stupid? I got back up, determined to do something, to be able to get back home. I couldn't push the fear away though, and suddenly I became aware of the silence. Minutes went by, and there were no birds, there were no squirrels. I couldn't even find a single ant on the rough dirt floor. It was as if something sucked all the life out of the planet. The only thing left, the creature making the screaming noise. I took another step and tripped, a small root catching my feet. That was the last straw. I broke down crying. After about 2 minutes of me feeling sorry for myself, I heard something rustling in the bush. My eyes darted around me to the patch of open path right in front of me. "Hello?" I called out into the night and immediately realized how stupid that was. Hello. I forgot about the injury as I started scrambling to get up. It was silent again, but I didn't stop to dwell. I just ran. I changed direction almost every 5 minutes, hoping to lose whoever replied. About 10 minutes later, I saw something that made me stop running. It looked like a cave. It might have been about the first grayish-black thing I had seen yet, almost as dark as the night, but very reflective in the moonlight. It had jagged edges and looked as if an adult could only get through crawling on their knees, almost the perfect size for me. I took a few steps closer to it, a faint whistling sound coming from deep inside. To this day, I don't know why I went inside. I can't tell you what overcame me, what powerful force willed my small feet to move into the dark, dark area. But when I stepped a few feet inside, it wasn't dark. I could see everything, every outline of the cave wall, every rock and stone in the cave. It was as if I became nocturnal. I couldn't comprehend it. I kept going. I came into a split into the middle of the cave, right or left. I went right. As my footsteps echoed through the small space, I started to creep slowly, afraid something would hear me. It was only a few minutes before the cave widened. I was able to go up on my toes and not touch the ceiling. The long cave spread out. I could see something in the distance. It was in a rectangular shape, and even in the bare light of the cave, I could see every edge, every surface, every carved symbol. I stepped closer, a stench rising from the area. I couldn't tell what it was, but it was wretched. I had to plug my nose as I crept closer to the big box. There was nothing in it. I was confused, and my mind started running. What was that smell? What was the smell? What was that smell? I looked ahead of me as I was previously oblivious to anything but the box. I found the smell. Bodies. So many of them piled up to the roof of the cave. I couldn't count all of them. Were my friends in there? Tommy, Sarah, Alex. My feet wouldn't move. I just stared. My eyes wouldn't move. My feet stuck in cement. I saw women. I saw men. I saw children. Hello. I bolted. The silence broken and a maniacal laugh rang through the cave. And as quickly as it came, it was gone. And I was quickly to the edge of the cave. I ran, and I ran, and I ran. My feet tore against the soles of my shoes until they were numb. I was cut by so many thorns and branches. It looked as if a knife was taken to every inch of my skin. I didn't stop running. I couldn't. And I was free. The tree line broke and I was back outside, my backyard in view. I kept running and running till I got to the front. There were cop cars and I could see all the parents talking to the police. Alex and Sarah huddled next to theirs. My mom saw me and I collapsed into her arms. We started crying and neither of us said a word. The silence didn't last long though. "Tommy?" I heard a woman cry out next to me. "Where's my boy?" Tommy's mom was now screaming frantically as her husband tried to contain her. Both their faces damp in the glow of the moon. "My boy! Tommy!" Tommy never came home. "More suction, please." Berta, my favorite scrub nurse, and at one point lover, stuck the tube into the patient's brain. The large inhalation of the machine slurped up the blood that was obscuring my view. I continued using the cauterizer to start separating the vasculature from the tumor. I felt a bead of sweat trickle down my forehead, and I took a second for my resident to dab my head. This hangover was going to be the death of me. The patient was a 46-year-old male presenting with right side weakness and some dysarthria. We immediately took the patient for an MRI and discovered a large mass in the left side of the patient's brain. None of this was new to me. I had performed more tumor resection in my long career than I would care to count. I had about a 75% success rate, which for the type of operations I did was pretty good. My goal was always to keep my deaths per year below vending machine deaths, something I had never been able to achieve. When I came to talk to Scott, the patient, he was alert if not a little boring. Then again, you don't go to the neurosurgery floor for a scintillating conversation. "And what is it that you do, Scott?" I asked through gritted teeth, regretting the last few glugs of bourbon the night before. "I work at NASA," he said this quickly and refused to look at me. "Let me guess." I smirked behind my clipboard. "Accountant?" Another positive of my job is people with brain tumors often don't notice when they're being insulted. This man definitely wasn't exploring the vastness of space. His sour face looked like it was instead subscribed to multiple porn sites. "No." Scott turned his gaze to me, and my smirk disappeared. I left the room quickly to let my resident finish the exam. Something about the way he looked at me was off. More irrigation, please. This sentiment was followed up by more fluid leaving the dropper and more sweat leaving my body. I had almost completely exposed the tumor now and was just trying to make sure it was completely detached from the surrounding blood supply before I began tugging. As surgeons, we emphasize the precision and skill that is a part of this work. This is mostly due to our egos and hubris, but also if you understood how indelicate and violent surgery could be, you may be less inclined to let us cut a hole in your skull. Fluoro, please. The use of fluoroscopic dye helped to cleanly identify the tumor from the surrounding brain tissue. As Berta activated the overhead light, I saw that I had done a great job. I had clean margins and could see no additional tumor clinging to the brain. Alright, turn off the fluoro, please. I waited a second but could still see the mask glowing. Berta, turn it off. I put more urgency into my voice as every second spent with your brain exposed increased your risk of infection, and despite the chill he ran up my spine, I preferred to avoid the paperwork that came along with a negligent death. It is off, doctor. She sounded confused, and as I looked up, I could see why. The light had been turned off, and there should have been no reason for the tumor to continue shining, yet there it was shining bright green in contrast to the swelling pink that surrounded it. I was about to ask Berta to run a diagnostic on the machine, but just then the tumor ceased glowing. It once again looked like the gray, lifeless hunk of meat. Me and Berta shared a quick laugh, ready to pass off the incident as one of those things. That was until I continued my work and the color of the tumor shifted to a bright pink, almost matching the brain exactly. I could only make out the difference between it and the surrounding tissue because of my previous work cauterizing the entire area. More irrigation, please, I said through a shaky voice. As medical science improves, our margin of error decreases almost to the point of certainty. The scary thing is, though, sometimes things just happen in the body that we can't account for. Tumors don't show up in scans or show up in the wrong place. Terminal diagnoses can write themselves on their own, and people can come in and die from the hiccups. I didn't know what was happening, but I understood there was a man open on the table who would die if I spent too long speculating. Berta! I said this with as much exclamation as I could for someone who was currently holding sharp instruments near gray matter. I finally looked up from the microscope, expecting to see her still in shock from the incident. Instead, I saw that she had done exactly what I had asked. She had attempted to irrigate the field, but she had the dropper hung motionless over Scott's head. I could see the fluid suspended and 3 tiny droplets refusing to succumb to gravity. I looked over at my resident, who was also motionless, hovering behind me. I went to call for help, not knowing what was happening, but knowing it needed to be fixed. That was when some motion caught my eye. The motion was coming from Scott's brain, and I carefully looked once more through the microscope. The tumor had given up any thought of camouflage as it turned into a deep purple color. The motion I was witnessing could only be described as wriggling. The creature was pulsating, and holding my hand near it, I felt enough heat to pull away. If only I had pulled my gaze away as well. But at this point, I couldn't move, and I was condemned to study this thing as it had invaded my OR in Scott's body. As the purple mass writhed and wriggled, it flipped itself over and exposed a red circle that encompassed almost half the thing itself. It was a sucker, and the mass that I had spent time carefully detaching from the brain began to recombine and heal itself. It started to slide out of my field of view, and as it did, I saw that it was much longer than I thought possible. It passed by like a subway car through viscera for what seemed like hours, but couldn't be more than seconds until it was entirely out of view. Here's that irrigation, doctor. Berta's voice almost gave me a heart attack as I accidentally knocked over a tray of surgical instruments on my right. Jim, are you okay? Her eyes peering at me from above her surgical mask looked at me with concern and then at the patient on the table. Wait, what happened to the tumor? I had one of my colleagues close up as I made my way to the bar downtown. The entire time I felt as though I was being followed by scary black cars containing men in black suits. As I was sitting at the bar stool cradling a glass of bourbon, my phone went off. It was Berta. They had taken Scott back for additional scans and had found that we had made a mistake. The tumor was much bigger than we thought. and resided in the opposite side of the brain. Scott was doing well post-op and had been consuming a lot of calories, and apparently he had been asking to see me quite forcefully. Jim, I'm not sure what happened today, but I'm sure that Howowitz can take this case if you can't handle it. Berta had seen me try and fail rehab multiple times and even drove me to a few of them. I'm sure she just expected I needed time to sober up and get my head right. That, however, was not what I needed to do. I texted her back immediately. No. I typed as I downed the rest of the bourbon. I will see him tomorrow morning in OR3. I don't know what it is that I saw, but I can promise you one thing. Scott Branson will not make it off my table tomorrow. Many of you may know about the ongoing blow-up of artificial intelligence, better known as AI. People usually only tend to use it to mess around, generate art, or even do their homework for them. I am definitely guilty of the latter one. However, little did I know that it can do so much more than anyone would believe. My name is Ethan, and I live with my girlfriend Ava in a home in a small town called Dickinson up in North Dakota. We live relatively happy lives together and have well-paying jobs, other than long hours that we work, but we need to have a way to pay for our bills, insurance, etc. Normally, we get home from work around the same time, but today I got off a few hours before Ava, and so I had some free time to kill. I had the fun idea that I could mess around with some AI for a bit, since it was exciting and all. For your reference, I use the popular artificial intelligence ChatGPT app on my phone whenever I decide to use AI. I wanted to test its boundaries and see what it could do, so I decided to ask the AI one simple question. What will happen in my future? Now normally when you ask an AI a question like, what will happen in my future, you'll get a very simple answer like, I'm sorry I cannot predict the future, or I'm not capable of that. Well, that's exactly what type of answer I got, at least until I tried again and again. And on my third attempt, it gave me an answer. You will go to the grocery store today. I was utterly shocked and kind of confused, like anyone would be. Why would it actually give me an answer? I was just messing around, and why would I be going to the grocery store today? My girlfriend and I both go to the grocery store on Saturdays. It's always been like that ever since we moved in together around 2 years ago. I don't go to the store for any other reason, and so I disregarded the AI's comment. Thought it was some kind of glitch, or maybe an AI coder messing with me. I wasn't sure what to do, so I curiously asked the same question again. And to my surprise, it once again responded with another answer. You will receive a phone call today. I truly thought the AI was messing with me until a minute or so later, my phone buzzed. It was a call, and it was from Ava. This had to be a coincidence, because there was no way artificial intelligence can actually somehow see into my future. Although I was freaked out, I answered my phone. Hello? Hey Ethan, I'm going to be working a little later tonight. Do you mind going to the grocery store to pick up a gift and a card for my mom's birthday tomorrow? The store will be closed by the time I get off, so I won't be able to make it when I'm off. Is this some kind of joke? I replied. What do you mean? Ava said. It had to be a joke or some kind of prank, because otherwise there was no way to explain this. The AI just predicted that I would receive a call and that I would go to the grocery store. Maybe this was all just some huge coincidence, or maybe the AI I had used was just bugged. That's what I wanted to believe anyway. Hello? Ethan, you there? Ava stammered out. Yeah, sure, I can do that. Okay, thank you. Make sure to get her something nice, okay? I will, don't worry. We talked on the phone for a couple of minutes until we hung up. I decided not to tell her about what the AI had just told me just moments before she called me. I knew she wouldn't believe me. She'd probably think that I was just messing with her, the way I thought she was just messing with me. I grabbed my keys and headed to my car and drove to the grocery store, the one Ava and I always go to. I made my way to the birthday card section and was picking out one of the cards. I couldn't focus, and I found myself in an endless loop thinking about what the AI had said. I had to test it out to prove to myself that this was not real and everything that happened was just pure coincidence. And so I used my phone and asked the AI, what will happen in the future? It didn't answer, not like the typical sorry, can't do that answer. It actually just didn't say anything at all. I wasn't sure if I was happy or even more concerned. While I was thinking about all of this, I noticed that there was an older man who was dressed in all black, standing about 10 feet to my left. He seemed to be looking for a card just like I was, but in my peripheral vision, the man seemed to be looking right at me. His fierce gaze burned into my soul, unlike any other. I wanted to turn and to confront the person staring at me. I was almost too scared to turn fully at the man frozen in time. And just as I was about to turn and face the stranger, I had noticed on my phone that the AI had answered my previous question. "You will be followed." This sentence made my heart sink into my shoes. I was too scared to move. I've never really frozen up like this and could not feel my legs. In my peripherals, it almost seemed as if the man was getting closer to me. He was now about 5 feet away. I don't know why I wasn't able to move. It felt as if I was under some kind of spell cast by some witch or wizard. I was sure I was going to die right then and there, until suddenly I was abruptly startled by a woman who tapped on my right shoulder and asked me in a kind voice, "Are you finding everything okay?" "Yes, I am." Satisfied with my answer, the woman walked away. Being startled by this woman allowed me to move again and almost made me forget about the man who was keeping me under his hypnotic state. I quickly turned to my left, expecting to meet the man's gaze, but was met with nothing. The man had somehow vanished. I thought I was just seeing things, but that didn't explain my inability to move. I couldn't explain the events that had just transpired, nor how the AI could predict such events. I didn't want to ask the AI that question ever again, but it seemed like I didn't have a choice. I looked at my phone, and sure enough, just as I thought this, the AI wrote me an answer to the question I'd been asking it. But this time, I never actually asked it. The AI said, "Your girlfriend will go missing." Now I'd seen enough with the AI to know that it wasn't messing around. I quickly called Ava, and to my horror she didn't answer. She always answered the phone when I called her, no matter what she was doing. I actually don't remember the last time she didn't pick up, so I began to freak out. I ran to my car, not even caring about purchasing a birthday gift for Ava's mother. I put the keys in the ignition and floored it to our house. By this time, Ava would be almost home. However, she said she'd be working late, so I have no idea how much longer it will be till she's here. I just hope that she's okay. It's been about 2 hours since I made it back home from the grocery store, and Ava has yet to answer any of my calls. I want to believe that her phone is just out of battery, but I feel that this is not the case. I even tried to contact her mother, but to no avail. I'm beginning to panic, and I'm not sure what to do. Maybe I should call the police. Maybe I should go out looking for her. Or maybe I should... I noticed my phone, which has a new notification from the AI. A new answer to a question I never asked. "You will die tonight." I didn't even have time to react to this, because as soon as I read it, my home was filled with the sound of a doorbell. I got up with relief, thinking my girlfriend finally made it home from her eternal long shift. As I was getting up, the one doorbell ring turned into 2, and then 3, and then a repetitive sound that kept on continuing. I did not know why my girlfriend would ring the doorbell so many times. As a matter of fact, why would she be ringing the doorbell to her own home? I was about 15 feet from the door when the ringing turned into violent banging sounds on the door's wood. I got to the door and looked through the peephole. I was horrified. I could easily tell the person outside my home was the same person that was at the store with me just hours ago. They were wearing the same dark clothes from earlier and stared at the door with the same menacing gaze that I felt from before. Although I was scared that the man followed me to my home, what scared me the most was his face. His face shook me to my very core. He had pale, almost gray skin with pitch black eyes that seemed to have no soul. He had a terrible smile on his face, stretching from ear to ear with what seemed to be water dripping from his grin. He chuckled, and I jumped back in fear and yelled, "Who are you? And where is Ava?" The banging on the door stopped, and the home fell silent. There was no response from that thing that stood outside the door. In this moment of terror, my heart sank after I remembered that I did not lock the door out of habit, since Ava usually arrives home shortly after I get home. If this thing decided to try the doorknob, then I was as good as dead. I slowly stepped towards the door, making sure not to creak the floorboards that stood in my path. I took a few steps and the worst happened. The floor creaked, and that thing began its banging on the door once more. I rushed towards the door handle to twist the lock, but it was too late. The thing was already ahead of me and began opening the door. As the door began to open, I shoved my shoulder into the door to keep it closed. However, whatever this thing was, it was inhumanly strong. It pushed as hard as it could and almost hit its grimace hands through the door frame. With the help of fear and adrenaline, I managed to close the door, just enough to lock it. This thing began to bang on the door even harder than before, and it screamed with a hellish laugh. I was shivering in fear as I have never heard anything scream in such a way. I ran to my bedroom and began crying the most tears I had ever cried in my life. I didn't understand what was happening and why it was happening to me. I thought of my girlfriend who I wanted to make my wife. I wished that I could just wake up and realize that this was all some sick nightmare. However, I knew that this wasn't the case. The banging had gotten much louder, and the door sounds like it's about to give way under that thing's sheer force. Its laugh has also gotten louder, and it almost seems like it knows that it's going to get in. And I believe it will. But I'm not going down without a fight. I'm writing this experience down in hopes that people will learn from my experience. I have a bat in hand, and will try my best to fight back against this thing. Please, if you're reading this, take my advice when I say, never ask AI about your future. An anomaly is defined as anything that deviates from the expected, normal, or standard. This is quite a wide definition. An ant being slightly stronger than most others of its species is an anomaly, but so is something that breaks our perception of reality, something that goes against everything we've ever known. Bringing the nature of existence into question is an anomaly, something to be studied. When it gets swept away unexplained, however much the anomaly has affected your life, you begin to feel a lot like that ant, insignificant. My sister is an anomaly now. It started with a simple complaint about her hand feeling strange, a tingling sensation. The doctor almost flat out refused to do anything. I wanted to be angry, but then I remembered telling her in my own thoughts, "It's nothing. Everyone gets weird feelings. It'll pass." It was what everyone told her. I suppose we thought we were reassuring her. Then the next symptom began. We awoke to her screaming over and over, "My hand is drooping! My hand is drooping!" Without any context, what does that even mean? She knew exactly what it meant. She was the only one living this nightmare. Nobody could quite understand what she felt. I burst into her room seconds before our parents did the same. There she knelt on her bed, with the fingers of her right hand about twice as long as usual. "I can feel them," she cried. "They're trying to continue." My mother flicked the switch, perhaps hoping that our eyes deceived us in the dark. The middle of the night in a very dim light, it seemed to teeter right on the edge of reality. It's the perfect condition to conjure up an illusion of the mind, yet this right here was as real as you. Her hand was stretched. My mother immediately dialed the emergency services, while my father went into comfort mode. Hey, it's all right. Are you feeling okay?" My sister sat for a moment, staring at her hand. Her breathing remained constantly heavy. In the background, I could hear my mother on the phone, although I wasn't paying much attention. "Yes, twice as long. She was asleep. No, I don't know how. I feel..." She paused, perhaps focusing on the feeling, deciding whether or not she felt okay. How could she even describe okay in this moment? "Long." My father and I glanced at each other for a moment. Was that meant to be a joke? I smiled awkwardly. "What does that mean?" She got up from her bed, making it slowly apparent to all of us that she was taller, not by much, maybe an inch or two, but in the context of human height overnight, that's a lot. The room fell silent. I think I could make out the operator on the other side of the phone trying to see if my mother was still there. Physically she was, but mentally, I think she was just worried for her daughter. "What's happening to me?" Her voice broke slightly. It broke all of us along with it. To sound so dazed and lost about your own self is heartbreaking. It was the last time I saw her with any description of human emotion. She lunged towards my mother in the doorway, not to hurt her, just to leave the room. Although with the urgency she had in her movement, I don't believe she would have cared if she hurt anybody on the way out. We all called out for her, but she didn't turn back around. She didn't speak. She just ran through the house. Leaving the light of her room, she blended into the shadows. I don't know if my mind deceived me, but I swear I saw her hit her head on the ceiling multiple times, as if she was growing further. Each time she did, she grunted with pain, as if using a voice that was not her own. Each of us only seeing her from the corner of our eyes had managed to lose her in our own home. My father searched around upstairs while my mother, still on the phone, started wandering the streets outside. Catching a glimpse of something out the back window of the kitchen, I stepped outside. I was afraid of what I might be walking into, what nightmare could be waiting for me. I decided that whatever it was, I owe it to my sister to join her on this. Slowly, I made my way towards the movement. She had wrapped herself around a tree in the garden, one we used to climb as kids. She spoke something that I could only just make out over the sound of my own heart pounding. Everything is lost. Her voice, raspy and weak, frightened me. Her black hair, usually down to her shoulders, now found its way to the floor. I couldn't see her fully in the night, but the moonlight allowed me to see her vague shape. She was elongated, more so than before. My voice shook as I spoke, trying to calm her. "We'll fix this." I held out my hand. For a moment, I thought she might hold out her own. Maybe she would have if the sirens weren't so loud. An ambulance at the front of the house caught her attention as she let go of the tree, her snake-like limbs falling to the ground as she made her way over to the fence. They never caught her. They never found her. Her funeral was held a month later. It's been 3 years. I still live in the same house. Her bedroom is almost exactly as it was. We keep her door open. Sometimes as I walk past, I imagine her sat in her bed. Her body is back to its regular self. "I'm okay now," she'll say. "You helped me." But it's a mirage, a trick of the mind. My sister as herself is no longer real. Is she still out there, stretched? I got my answer last night. Unable to sleep, I slowly became acutely aware of a tapping noise. I don't know how long it had been going before my mind allowed it to be perceived. Seconds, minutes, hours. I suppose it doesn't matter. Once I had heard it, it stayed. 5 taps, rhythmically pattering against my window, behind the curtain. Sick of the noise, I got up, ready to see the tree branches blowing in the wind. Instead, I saw 5 long fingers extended from below my vision. The palm of the hand seemed just on the edge of what I could see. A face, beginning halfway up the window and continuing far below, looked in at me. The eyes were long, with the open mouth being even longer. This was unmistakably my sister's face. Whether or not it's my sister is another question. I stood there for a moment, recoiling, but not making a sound. Her appearance is not what scared me the most. My hand began to tingle. My name is Tracy Butzer. I found a cult who worship creepy supernatural beings and got saved by an organization fighting against those creatures. After an hour, the vehicle finally stopped. I quickly hid the book I found in my overcoat before an armed man escorted me and Jason out of the vehicle. We entered a modern-looking building, and they took us to an elevator. The elevator kept going down for what seemed like forever. Once we reached the floor we needed to be on, they took us to a room and asked us to wait. "This place is pretty cool, isn't it?" Jason said to me. I didn't respond. "Is everything okay?" he asked. Something about this organization is really off. Unnatural Detainment Association. Why do they detain those creatures rather than eliminate them? If their goal is to protect the public, then detaining them doesn't seem to be the best idea. "Nothing," I replied. "He won't get it. There's no point asking him." Then 2 women came into the room and escorted us into separate rooms. They questioned me about what happened. I told them everything about Brittany, the cult, Ray's death, but didn't mention the book. Once we were done, they handed us a book. This is the manual with all the rules broadcasted until now. You can also use the website to get broadcast of new rules, the woman told us. Then we were let go. I went to my home trying to figure out what was going on. I read the book they gave me, and it had rules and unnatural sightings. When I was done reading that, I started reading the UNF ritual books. There were many rituals in there, but one that caught my eye was Ritual to Form a Pact with the Unnatural. I read the book but didn't realize how late it had gotten. I was about to get ready to sleep, but then I noticed something. There was a silhouette behind my mailbox. I took the biggest knife in my kitchen and went out. There was nobody there. I opened my mailbox, and there it was, a black letter. Suddenly my surroundings turned red. I looked at the ground and ran back inside my home. That is when I regretted putting a mirror behind my front door. The black creature started emerging from the mirror. I tried to stab it, but the knife flew out of my hand and hit one of the stairs behind me. I then punched the mirror to break it. It broke. The thing was no longer there, but my fist got injured and blood was dripping. From the blood emerged the creature with 6 arms and 3 bloodshot eyes. I tried to run upstairs, but it grabbed my left arm. I managed to grab the knife by my right hand. That's when I suddenly remembered the ritual. A fresh meat offering, huh? I mumbled. I then cut my left arm off using the knife and offered it to the creature. Then I started losing consciousness, possibly due to the blood loss. The last thing I saw was the creature eating my arm before passing out. When I woke up the next day, everything was a mess. It was not a dream, and I knew it. Something felt different about me. Something. That's when I noticed the blood-red symbols on my left arm, which was still attached to my body. I was processing what happened when 2 armed men walked into my home. They started shooting at me, but the bullets were slow as a ball being thrown by a toddler. I dodged them and then I lost consciousness again. The next thing I knew was that the 2 were dead. There were more of them outside my front door, so I took the ritual book and escaped from the back door. I didn't know what happened to me, but there's only one thing I can do. Run.